It was for Shell, the oil company in Sinai. And when the '56 war broke out between Egypt and Israel, they had to escape. They left everything behind. And my mother, as a four-year-old child, essentially recalls everything of that night when they left to Cairo. My grandmother has nothing from her childhood, has one wedding photograph. They lost their home, they lost many, many things. They returned to the Sinai when things began to settle, and then when the '67 war broke out, they decided they were going to emigrate to the United States, and we came in 1968. That experience that they've had with 2 wars living in that region really drove many of the thoughts and thinking processes, and the trauma that they experienced ultimately drove how they feel today. No, I guess it's been a lot of progress has been made, but have felt over time about Muslim-Jewish relations. Unfortunately, they defined it based upon the traumatic experience that they particularly had, as many, many do across the world. So I figured there are 2 ways to go about this. One way is to repeat the past and continue this going through the generation to generation. Another way is to understand the past and learn from it. And my engagement with Muslim-Jewish relations is very much defined by the let's say, faulty statements of my grandmother over the course of years that I've tried to since correct repeatedly, and trying to recognize that I don't want my children to learn and understand things the way that they have. So, when I look at efforts for dialogue and conversation and opening doors, I don't look at them as a matter of interfaith conversation that is just everybody talks about their religion and we go home. And many of us have attended these programs with the rabbi, the priest, and the imam, and frankly, they're very boring. For the most part, depending on who's speaking. And I recognize it's not working. It's just not working. This traditional sense of interfaith dialogue is not working because we're not getting to the people on the street. We're not getting to the people that really matter. We're getting to people who perhaps are already engaged, or perhaps just want to talk about their religion, maybe in some cases to convert others, or just to whatever it might be. And I realized at a point that in order to truly engage people, there must be human interaction between them, and that comes at the very street level. Not with the leaders, not with the governments, not with the presidents, but ultimately with youth and young people who perhaps have influence within their own families, or perhaps influences over entire NGOs. It all matters. So when I saw the effort of MJC, because I had actually been part of an initiative at university as well, a Muslim-Jewish initiative as well, it inspired me because I recognized that it was actually putting let's just say, putting the action to the ground and running with it. And when I first participated in Bratislava as a participant, and I was blown by the level of dialogue, by the level of conversation, that for the first time Pakistanis were meeting Israelis, coming out of Karachi. They had never met a Jew in their life, and this was the first experience that they had had. And for the first time, Israelis were meeting Pakistanis and talking about human issues, talking about things with no censor, no filter. This was not a PC initiative that everybody can just talk about the weather and everybody's health. It was more about, this is you, this is me, this is why I feel as I am, this is why you feel as you are, what can we do about it? And when you see people from nearly 40 countries coming together to engage, 50 countries, God bless, to engage and talk real talk. This was the first time I had ever seen anything like it, and it blew my mind. And it blew my mind so much that I became part of the core team of the project, and Ilya has since become a very dear friend. And going now into its 5th year, I recognize that there's no other initiative across the world like the Muslim-Jewish Conference that comes out with projects and real things that matter. When there's anti-Semitism in Pakistan, and you have someone who is a journalist, who is a participant, who can then write op-eds in Pakistan about scapegoating of Jews. Or when you have Islamophobia in Europe, and you have Jewish participants in Europe who can stand up and say, no, this is real, and this is the type of effect and impact that we would like to have on a global scale. The reality is, unfortunately, that the organization is not sustainable, because financially, there are very few who have hope in Muslim-Jewish dialogue. Many people have written it off or said it's just inevitable that we will fight forever. And I recognize and remember my history as an American Egyptian, but somebody who came from a country that there was a large Jewish population 50, 60, 70 years ago. And I remind my grandparents repeatedly of that time. And I tell them, this is not the way that it's always been. And anyone who tells you so is a liar. Because this is not our history. We're better than this. We're bigger than this. And we can change it back to what it was. And maybe even make it better than our history. And I feel that there's a point where we can talk and we can feel good and we can go to synagogues and mosques, but there's also a point where we have to begin to put our finances where it counts. And if Ilya won't ask, because he has a hard time asking, and it's part of his nature, and it's a good thing, let me ask, let us ask, let Dan ask, because we need support from the community. MJC is going into its 5th year, and it relies on the generosity of about 2 donors consistently. It has been very hard to get governments and others on board. A, because in many ways they have an agenda. It's very hard to discern which one doesn't and which one does and who has good intentions. But B, also because, again, there's this feeling of, many people just feel that the conflict should just be perpetuated for their own interests. And this goes, unfortunately, is something that I've seen frequently. We're looking for help from you, the citizens, the people who care, the Americans, the Europeans, the Middle Easterners, the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, This is what we need, and it needs to be grassroots, and that's why we're here today. So what I would ask you, because I don't want to go beyond the 5 minutes that I promised, think about what you are able to give to this initiative. And this may not be the first time. Perhaps you'll be able to support in the future as the organization grows and grows and grows in its influence. But think about what you're able to give, and give what you can, and it will be our honor to receive your support. Because we know that you're here, and you recognize that Dalia, who is an incredible activist, is here. And she's proof of this type of work, although she's not part of MJC directly, but her work is very much in line with the type of mission that we have. Dan, and how he's opened his doors to all. We have guests from Saudi Arabia in the room with guests who have been to Israel. I mean, this is what we are looking to see accomplished here, and we need you to help make that happen and make it only grow and not go backwards. So support as you can. Thank you.